guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. I hope you guys are doing well. I have a special guest with me today, Zoya Hyman. So Zoya,
Hey.
whenever I have guests here with me, they have to do the
Oh, a little shimmy. I like that.
yes,
Good with
yes,
that.
yes. So welcome to my YouTube channel. Thank you for being part of it today. So before we begin, what I'll do is I'll let you introduce yourself briefly, and then I have an icebreaker, and then I'll mention the reason why you're on this platform. So I
Okay.
already said you're Zoya, so
Yes. I'm hoping that my voice will give a little character today. And I have my tea. So,
okay.
well, yes, I'm Zoya Hyman,
Mm-hmm.
born and raised on St. Martin. Ever since I've known myself, I've just been kind of always the peacemaker in the middle of friends and family and everything.
Okay.
And I remember having conversations with my mom as a little girl talking about, how to help people and how we can do better in the
Mm-hmm.
world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I wanted to be a gynecologist because
Oh.
I'm fascinated with women's bodies and them being able to create life and that
Mm-hmm.
whole process. So
Mm-hmm.
I said, hey, let's jump into that. But chemistry had different plans for me in high school. Like, I am not going to medical school, forget it.
Mm-hmm.
And so my second option was psychology. And I
Okay.
decided to go to college, earn my degrees, and then I moved back home. And I've been working here ever since as a forensic mental health counselor,
Okay.
because I'm also interested in trauma and victimology and
Mm-hmm.
also offenders and the process of sending someone to prison, rehabilitating them, well,
Mm-hmm.
trying to,
Mm-hmm.
or if your laws provide that service, so that, ultimately we can be safe and we can be better as a collective if
Mm-hmm.
we can also support our vulnerable population.
Okay.
So yeah, I went into it, I went for it, and I'm here now, and I've been working as a therapist ever since, and I love the human mind and body. So
Mm.
yeah,
All
that's me.
right. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. So we'll step into our little icebreaker. It's pretty simple. Two things that you can choose to do. You can do either or you can do both. So the
Okay.
first one is attitude of gratitude, something that happened during this week that you're grateful for, or a scripture that you use to keep you going, to keep you motivated. Either or you can do both.
Hmm. Let's do let's do both. I'm trying to remember the scripture now, but maybe I just say it.
Okay.
Um, Something this week that I did express great gratitude for was my body being able to like deal with COVID and
Mm-hmm.
like I'm alive and I'm
Mm-hmm.
healthy enough to function,
Yeah.
thankfully. And I was just grateful because I said, COVID has been out for 2 years. This is my first time getting it. Anything could
Mm-hmm.
have happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was very grateful that, my health stepped up to the plate. My
Yes.
immune system. I was talking to my antibodies and I said, listen, y'all, we got to get it together. This thing
All
can't
right.
out. Um, and one scripture, whew, the one actually that I have been meditating on, it's a psalm. Maybe if I can take 5 seconds and I find it. It's a psalm. It's the entire chapter.
Mm-hmm.
So I should be able to remember the psalm, right? But no.
Trust me, I understand.
Oh, here we go. Psalm 37, specifically the one about, God's children not begging, that we've
Mm-hmm.
never seen the righteous forsaken.
Yes.
That entire psalm is just so encouraging because sometimes we I tend to feel like, my goodness, what is happening,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I'm always just so encouraged by God's faithfulness to us
Yes.
and the fact that
Yes.
he is God of creation. He's the creator. So I'm like, yo, I got that God in my corner. Like, I don't got to worry about nothing. Now, I know that times are going to be hard, they're going to be challenging. I'm going to be faced with so much, but God has never, nor will he ever forsake us. And so
Yes.
all we have to do is trust the moment, get some good coping skills,
Yes, yes,
but
yes.
trust in his faithfulness and
Mm,
his heart and his hand toward us and his love for us.
mm,
So that entire psalm, but specifically that verse, it really has been on my meditation for the past, I would say, couple months, actually. So yeah, Psalm
Okay.
37.
All right. Thank you for that beautiful, beautiful scripture. And I had actually, before we started, there was a scripture that I don't remember it word for word, but I had a friend that was on here. I interviewed her last month, I believe, and she said, I think you know it. It's something about forsaking as well. I will never leave nor forsake you. I will uphold you with my right hand. And that in itself, it's really powerful because God is faithful. Faithful. He's never gonna just leave us go. And
Never.
that's what keeps me, grounded. So thank
Yeah.
you for that encouraging scripture. So
Mhm.
we'll go right into the interview portion of today's interview. So as you mentioned, you said that you studied forensic therapy. Initially you were into gynecology. Chemistry was the reason why you didn't continue. What was the reason why you chose specifically forensic therapy and not family therapy and
Mhm.
those different ones?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I grew up this is so interesting to say. I grew up surrounded by people. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would always observe people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have humble beginnings.
Mm-hmm.
So, live a little ghetto life,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
understand? Um, and so for friends, I had friends who were on the streets,
Mm-hmm.
in the streets, like in
Mm-hmm.
the streets
Mm-hmm.
on the block and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. In school, I had friends who were part of gangs. Also being in school, you're seeing gang fights all the time in St. Peter's on the road. And so it's something that was around. And
Mm-hmm.
I would talk to a lot of these mainly guys, and I would be like, oh, but he doesn't really have love home. Or he
Mm.
doesn't have the type of guidance, to keep him on the path. I knew this one guy who got a full scholarship to college. He ended up on the streets. And I
Wow.
said, for a person who loves whatever he did and had the opportunity to choose the streets, that's not a typical process. It's not something that's typical. And so
Mm-hmm.
there has to be something. But I also saw them go to prison
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes come out worse. So I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
so first of all, these individuals kind of had the short end of the stick.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have the social, emotional support that they deserved, as all people do. And, there are antisocial features that are part of their personality, or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes coping through substances and substances being high and on, and that leading to other things. And we're putting them in a prison cell. And then what? We're expecting them to sit down for X amount of time and just learn the lesson. I said, no,
Mm-hmm.
these are people who deserve love and care and attention the same way. And because they were my friends, it touched me in a different way. And because I
Mm-hmm.
saw it for what it was, I was like, okay, yeah, no. But also being surrounded with people who were abused and people who also had to deal with the other end of the stick when it came to crime and things like that. And so I was like, okay, when I got my bachelor's in psychology, general psychology, and I was still kind of fishing my way through, figuring it out. And I said, no, this is what I want to do. And also this is the way my brain works. I'm a researcher at heart. So I ask questions, I investigate things, I go really deep into things. And so, just having the the connection from home and then seeing that this was something that I could explore professionally, it just happened for me. My professor, I got one geology professor tried to get me to study rocks. I said, ma'am, Not gonna work. I love it. I appreciate your passion, but it's not for me. I got other professors trying to get me to do all types of things, but trauma and forensics is what stuck.
Okay, okay. So you mentioned something about rehabilitation. So basically when they went in, they came they came out worse. So in your study and even looking back at that experience that you've seen your friends go through, where do you see is the disconnect? Like what do you think is the proper way that rehabilitation, the process should take place?
So I'll try to list it in chronological order, but this is generally what the steps should be. Programs within the prison, programs in treatment, an integrative approach to kind of like reintegration rather, and then follow up. And so with programs in treatment in a prison, people are coming in and they have to be seen, they have to be, like something has to be done, an assessment, whether, there are certain disorders that a person may deal with that you see in offenders, for example, intense psychopathy. So you have an antisocial personality disorder and rules just do not matter. And this can be to an extreme degree. So we like to look at things on spectrums. So it's not yes or no, it's more like, to what degree does this thing affect your functionality? Social, following social norms as well.
Yeah.
So making an assessment of, okay, this person is chronic antisocial, so we might have to keep them for a while, or we can kind of set a appropriate expectation for what the treatment outcome will be. Also for sexual offenses, sexual offenders, pedophiles, hebophiles, etc. Treatment sometimes it's hard, and I don't want to say unsuccessful, but it's a chronic illness, pedophilia, etc., sexual offenses. And so you want to have that within the prison, because you have to be able to make an assessment of who is coming in and who is going out. Outside is also supposed to have statistics of what crime do we see and face the most, and so that we can make social arrangements to kind of tackle that. So if we are seeing a lot of robberies, why are we seeing robberies? Is it our job? Is it our economy, job market, economy? Maybe make some changes there and then see what our crime statistics say, our robbery statistics say after. The reintegration plan is people have been sitting for over a year in your prison, and the world has changed.
Yeah.
The government building is requiring new documents for your registration form. They don't know that, right? There has to be a reintegration, and this is where you can incorporate family, you can incorporate occupational therapists, as occupational therapists help people with their occupations, figuring out what they do, what they like to do, what's good, how to keep themselves busy, how to also take care of themselves. And so this helps the person kind of put together, okay, I'm leaving prison after 5 years into a new world, but there is this plan set up to help me make that reintegration. And then following up, whether it's probation or parole, where the person reports to their parole officer, or sometimes you can even have certain halfway houses set up outside of prison. It's not legally informed or anything. It's that this person has the ability to come here, like a resource center, to receive support, etc. So that's generally what a good rehabilitation plan would look like, generally.
Okay, so as you mentioned that, I'm thinking about St. Martin. Some of these resources we don't really have here, the halfway house which would be something that is very important when someone is transitioning into society, so that it's kind of, I don't want to say that you're setting them up to fail, but that you provide them proper guidance into the community. Because as you mentioned, something as going to the government building to do certain things, and the documents that they're requiring wasn't something that they needed to do, that's just 6 months ago, and now they're coming here and you're telling me that I have to do this, and that can be frustrating to them,
It
but
can be frustrating to people
us,
who don't deal with anything, people
yeah,
who have been in society, because
yeah,
sometimes processes are just hard to navigate.
mm-hmm,
For any person, imagining now having the additional stress of, I don't even know what's been going on.
you kind of feel lost.
Mhm,
Like you take
absolutely.
me from here and you just dump me back in here. It's like, what am I gonna do now? As you mentioned, a different disorder, different disorders in that they may be dealing with while in prison. Do you think that persons get incarcerated that should not be based on mental illness that they have?
Yeah.
Is it something that you see here in St. Martin? And if so, how we can tackle this specific issue?
Yeah. So it's definitely something we see here.
Yeah.
And if you look at other countries, more developed countries, I would say, you have basically hospitals for the mentally ill who intersect with offending.
Mm-hmm.
So in Holland, it's
Mm-hmm.
called
Mm-hmm.
FOBA. In the States, I think it's just called a hospital. I don't think it's called anything specific.
Mm-hmm.
Where a person committing a crime and is that person in the States they call it insane, not guilty by reason of insanity. They that's an insanity plea.
Mm-hmm.
Here they don't have a specific name for it,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes they do question what is going on with the individual at the time of the crime. They want
Mm-hmm.
kind of like an assessment of before, but they
Mm-hmm.
specifically want it for at the time of the crime as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only thing with St. Martin is that we don't have a FOBA or mental clinic of sorts where an individual who has the intersection with the law and mental illness can go to. And this
Mm-hmm.
is why we see that there are individuals in the prison who shouldn't be at the
Mm-hmm.
prison. They should be in a
Mm-hmm.
mental facility
Mm-hmm.
so that they can receive treatment.
Mm-hmm.
A big misconception is that that's kind of like a get out of jail free card. And it is not, absolutely
Mm-hmm.
not. In the States, there's actually like a belief that it's better to go to prison than go to one of these facilities.
Oh,
Because
wow.
being in one of the facilities, you are diagnosed with
Mm-hmm.
something, a
Mm-hmm.
mental disorder,
Mm-hmm.
and you are gonna receive treatment for it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the extent of your prison sentence will definitely reflect the extent of your admission to the facility. But
Okay.
with the facility, you have something to follow,
Okay.
and that's kind of where we get into types of treatment that
Mm-hmm.
that these individuals may receive.
Mm-hmm.
That's a separate topic, but definitely we don't have that here, and so we do see that sometimes individuals don't need to be in prison; they need to be in treatment
Okay.
based on what is going on.
Okay, so when you mentioned when they did the crime, right? That is when they do the assessment to see whether or not what caused them to do what they did. And these are like more extreme cases, correct?
Yes.
So if the person had a mental breakdown and those type of things, this is the reason. If they're acting out of character, that's when they will more look at what caused them to do that. And that's when they look at the different places of where they can set them. But in cases where it's not that extreme, because when people do certain things, as you mentioned, when you were going into high school, so sometimes they would do this, but it's because they were going through problems back home at home.
Mhm.
Do you think that is something that should be done too before someone gets imprisoned, that an assessment is done to see what may have caused them and how they can help better treat them and maybe help them receive lesser sentence to look at the crime. Maybe they didn't
Yeah,
have any food at home or things like that that we
right.
can look at.
And those I would consider those like the social implications to crime. And that's what I
Mm-hmm.
said. If we're seeing that our based on our crime statistics, that
Mm-hmm.
robbery is high, we kind of have to figure out with our sociologists and that what's going on. Let's do some surveys. Let's see the job market. Let's look at the economy. Let's look at I know during COVID, they were doing this where they were trying to see what's the poverty line. We know how much we know how much we're getting paid, minimum wage. We know cost of living, gas, groceries, etc. How much those things cost. Of course, we have the numbers. We can figure out what's going on. And so definitely when it comes to schools, when it comes to places of employment, when it comes to mental health facilities, these are the places that can kind of do those assessments to see, okay, we have students who are coming from really bad home situations. Is there social services we can send them to, right? And so having social services in place where these individuals can get, whether it's a monthly stipend, food stamps, whatever the case may be, so that the resources are set up so that people can tap into them. And then, perhaps their social situations will, become easier. In psychology, we consider people's basic needs first. If you don't have money, you don't have shelter, we can't do much else. Or food. You need certain basic things to be able to even consider having a good life. And now it does not mean the house has to be 1,000 square meters. No. If it's 10 square meters, but it's safe, it's comfortable, it's not leaking, that is shelter for you. That is a basic need that's been met. And so definitely we can tackle crime before it happens. It's a whole study, and there are definitely structured ways of doing that so that we don't have to wait for the individual to end up in prison to then offer them treatment. That's the last thing that we want.
So this is more of a macro level type thing. So we're going to transition into what you're doing. And I know that you have Therapist Talks. That is your platform that you're using to get your word out there. So how did Therapy Talks come about?
Well, because I like to talk and I'm a therapist.
Simple.
Yeah. If I could show you, I have so many, you see, one is right here. I have so many notebooks just all around with notes and sketches, while I was in college, things that I would look at looking at my community, looking at my people, identifying barriers and needs and checking okay, what can I do within my own capacity?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's not within my capacity, but maybe I have some insights about this and I can talk about it and then say, okay, I have a very fiery mouth sometimes. I'm a passionate woman. And so sometimes I'm very we have to do better. I'm always ready for the revolution. I am always on the cusp of the revolution.
Yeah,
That's a different topic though. So advocacy and activism has always been close to my heart. Even when I was in the States, anything that I could support, even up there when it comes to Black Lives Matter, because Black Lives Matter everywhere. I've always been a passionate person. And so coming home, being home, and then seeing how my people don't really understand mental illness. And I'm like, y'all, it's real and it's here to stay. And so let's talk about it. And so for the past year and a half, I've just been building and planning. The course changed along the way, certain things, certain disappointments, but I was like, yo, we got to do this. And I launched it and I'm still figuring it out. But for me, it's just a platform where if people want the information, they can come and receive it. And I have a lot of plans for the platform. They're coming, but that's how I ended up here.
Okay. What are some recent plans that you have upcoming?
Well, I'll talk about one I already talked about, is the Ninjas Against Stigma mental health awareness campaign.
Okay.
And I'm like, people must be like, Zoya, where are you coming up with ninjas? But I watch a lot of like TV and movies. I'm always like learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I just got off of Cobra Kai. I don't know if you're familiar. It's a Karate Kid sequel. Like it's the thing that came after Karate Kid.
Okay, okay,
And
okay.
you know, I love culture. I
Mm-hmm.
love Asian culture and how principled these people are. And so I was inspired by ninjas actually. And I said, yeah, let's be ninjas who fight against stigma, the
Okay.
stigma of mental illness. Because if we can all identify as just a person even who is willing to fight against the stigma of mental illness,
Mm-hmm.
that frees up a lot of shame and judgment where people will be able to appropriately acknowledge what they're dealing with
Mm-hmm.
and so seek out treatment and support.
Mm-hmm.
Because right now, so many people suffer in silence and shame because of the stigma of being depressed, anxious, having a disorder. And so I said, no, we're going to fight against the stigma. And one way or another, we're going to normalize just the conversation about it so that
Yes.
people can
Yes.
just be free
Mm-hmm.
to live their lives, because
Mm-hmm.
having a mental illness is not the end of your life. Trust and believe that. And so we can't have people out here feeling that way, not for something that is not their fault and that is normal. And so let's be ninjas against stigma.
Yeah, that's been ninjas. And we
And
all go through it,
and
you
May
know?
is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so that's like, so tomorrow is like the official launch of the
Uh,
campaign.
oh, okay, okay. So this is, I was supposed to say that. That's the reason why I'm having this interview with you, because of Mental Health Awareness Month.
Nice.
I've had, or I'm having several persons on the platform, and you're one of the persons that I have, on
Nice.
here. And
Honored.
I know you also have another event, isn't it on the 6th?
Yes.
There, that's what I was referring to.
Mhm. With mental health in general, it's literally something that you deal with.
Correct.
And when you say you, it's yourself.
Yeah.
You deal with that, your mind, your body, your spirit. And that is the foundation of a healthy life. You have to be within yourself healthy or have a goal to be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're dealing with a mental illness, the foundation of that is, if this is a chronic diagnosis that you have, your life doesn't stop. So you can't forget yourself. You can't
Yes.
forget to take care of yourself. You can't forget to love yourself. You cannot forget to extend compassion to yourself, because a lot of my clients, people in general, I see some people being so hard on themselves, and I'm like, no, your system thrives with grace. Your system thrives with love and compassion. Now, there is a level of stress that we need to have. That's accountability. That's, discipline. If you got to do
Correct.
something, be on time, right? So
Yes.
there's always a sense of challenge there to ourselves. So we're not saying, que sera, be nonchalant, do whatever you want. But it's also about not being judgmental and
Don't be
so
too hard on
critical
yourself.
to
Yeah.
yourself, where you're not giving yourself the opportunity to grow, learn, fail,
Mm.
make mistakes, learn and grow from that as well.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, again, my community needs this. Let me offer this as a masterclass. And it's going to be a class where you come, we learn the foundations of the self, the mind, the body, and the spirit. We go into it a bit. We
Mm-hmm.
learn how to practice, first of all, what is self-care, self-love, and self-compassion,
Mm-hmm.
how to practice it. And then
Mm-hmm.
we'll be, exploring some techniques that
Mm-hmm.
the class can use in their daily life. And the class
Okay.
is going to be monthly, and so people can come. This is a higher ticket. So on the Facebook page, Therapist Talks, it's free.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is free. But the masterclass, though, it's going to be a higher ticket. So it's going to be a charge to it, because you're going to be
Okay.
receiving a lot of information as well. And
Okay.
it's going to be interactive.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. So what kind of talks do you have on Therapist Talks?
Monthly talks, and it's general information. So we've done 2 or 3 talks so far, where we discussed The first one, because that was happening socially, and I also wanted to keep it socially relevant.
Mm-hmm.
There were talks about being undocumented, and just the raids and sometimes how scary that is for
Mm-hmm.
undocumented individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to offer a little bit of insight into who an undocumented individual might be, where they're coming from, why they're here,
Mm-hmm.
what they usually deal with, and sometimes, not sometimes, and how these types of raids and stuff can impact them. And it wasn't a talk about there shouldn't be raids or there should be. It's more about us understanding the concept of being undocumented and how we can do our part in ensuring that these individuals have a safe and okay time in the community.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's free.
Free.
Monthly. If anyone has any specific question or topics that they would like to hear about, they can just send you.
Yeah.
Like, how do you go about that?
Yeah, so I generally choose the topic. Some people have suggested the topic, so they're in the work. So I just have to kind of see where they fit in. And so for this month, we didn't do a scheduled talk, but I did go live to discuss the self-love, self-care, and self-compassion masterclass. So we kind of went into that topic a little bit. And so next month is Mental Health Awareness Month. So it won't be like one scheduled talk. It's going to be like everyday information. And that's what I also do. So there's a scheduled talk every month, but I still share information pertaining to all things on the page. I even kind of went into the Will Smith, Chris Rock. I didn't go too much into it because I was not gonna join that debate. All I said was, here's how we can actually talk about this and some things that we could actually pinpoint instead of trying to air out people's dirty laundry, because that doesn't for us. Also, how do you handle conflict in your life? When you're angry, what do you do? Because it's easy to talk about other people.
That's true.
But it's a good tool to help us also evaluate ourselves and be like, if I felt like somebody disrespected my partner, what would I do?
Yeah.
What would be socially appropriate? Like what would the consequences be? And then that gives me a lesson on anger management, conflict resolution. Because I'm not gonna talk about people's personal lives. There's nothing for me.
Exactly. So, yeah. I love it. In one of the videos you discuss, and here during this interview, you also mentioned mind, body, and spirit. How does all that connect?
When you think about it, your mind this is your thoughts, your ideas, things you want, things you don't want. Your body is your body, your physical body. This is our vessel. We know what we need to do to take care of it.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully, because that's another thing. Like when we really think about it, it's like our parents, well, I don't know about your parents, but a lot of our parents didn't teach us anything. It's like there is so much to know about your, like, for example, relationship with food. What is food, first of all? Well, it's nutrients. Okay, but how? What type of nutrients? What does my body really need? What types of foods do that for me? I want to get back into the bush thing because I'm like, I've been hearing from so many older people about what this bush can do, that bush can do, which is why I think my body immune system did okay with COVID, because I'm like, I go and drink and eat the ginger. I put the ginger in the soup, the lemongrass, the bush tea, the this, the that, you understand? And it's like ensuring that your body gets what it needs, but also understanding why. Understanding that water is important because your body is water, and then it just helps you feel better, hydrated, but really understanding it. So mind, body, and then spirit, that is your essence, that is your faith, that is your anchor a lot of the times. And so being able to keep that healthy as well and keep that in check. And so all of those things combined make up who you are and the person that you are and how you interact with yourself and how you interact with the world.
Okay, so I talked about the mind and the body. Sometimes it's easier to understand those two aspects, but the spirit part, I don't think that everyone really realize or have an understanding of the importance of the spiritual aspect of our body, spiritual or soul. Can you elaborate a little bit more as to how does that help with our mental health, well-being?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, for me, I consider it almost like an anchor.
Mm-hmm.
And when I don't say necessarily God, because
Mm-hmm.
not every person subscribes to Christian
Beliefs.
practices and beliefs. So
Yeah.
it's more about your faith, because there is
Mm-hmm.
Allah, there is Buddha, there is all types of deities that people
Mm-hmm.
believe in. And
Mm-hmm.
so if your faith is also the universe, you just believe in science, all right? That
Mm-hmm.
is your faith. And
Mm-hmm.
what does your faith say about this life that we're living?
Mm-hmm.
What is it all for? Some people believe, well, I'm just here for a good time, not a long time. When I die, I'm dead. They say, okay,
Mm-hmm.
great. So you're here. You are
Mm-hmm.
here for a good time, not a long time.
Mm-hmm.
What's a good time? How do you
Mm-hmm.
have a good time? What are
Mm-hmm.
the things you do that make you feel alive, that make
Mm-hmm.
you feel special, right? That each person has this uniqueness about them, this essence, and what makes yours. Some people don't believe they have one. Some
Mm-hmm.
people's essence has been almost snuffed out or kind of like hidden under the basket, the light under the basket. And so it's about tapping into that essence of who you are and why you're here and what does all of this mean and what is your place in it.
Mm-hmm.
Because whether we want to believe it or not, we're here.
Yeah.
If you're alive, you're here. And it's for something, whether
Yeah.
it's for you wanting to live up in the hills
Mm-hmm.
by yourself,
Mm-hmm.
just living a natural life,
Mm-hmm.
you are enjoying the fruit of the earth. You are
Mm-hmm.
enjoying the peace that the earth has, that nature has to offer. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Once you feel good doing that, that's for you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so your spirit is your essence. It's who you are. It's why you're here. It's
Mm-hmm.
making sense of all of this. And it's important to have an anchor in something,
Mm-hmm.
some faith or some belief that
Mm-hmm.
this is what it is, this is reality, and I'm gonna work with it.
Listening to you explain it, it sounds very personal. We grew up in a Christian household, and a lot of times I talk about, knowing God for yourself, having that relationship with Him is important. So it comes back to that specific relationship with
Yeah.
who you believe in,
Yes.
in God.
Yes.
So therapy, you are a therapist. So if someone wants to do therapy with you, what does that look like? I'm seeking help and I reach out to you. And how does the process look? I know it differentiates per person depending on the situation, but what would it kind of ideally look like
Yeah.
coming to see you?
So no matter where you are in the world, finding a therapist, the best place to start is your doctor, because
Okay.
everybody should have a doctor. Everybody kind of knows what that process looks like. And if you don't have a doctor, you can go to any clinic and just ask them, how can I see a mental health specialist?
Mm-hmm.
And they might just inquire some more details from you. So
Mm-hmm.
whether it's Aston Martin, wherever,
Mm-hmm.
going to your GP and saying, I think I need support for my mental health, because your doctor is there for your physical health.
Mm-hmm.
We're here for your mental health.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one good way. And so right now I work at a facility, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the process of seeing me, going to your
Mm-hmm.
GP, asking them for a referral,
Mm-hmm.
and then that referral is sent over to us
Mm-hmm.
to see whoever comes in the door.
Okay. So what does your framework look like? How do you, because there's what's cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
Which one do you usually, is there a specific one that you use?
I use CBT, cognitive
Mhm,
behavioral therapy. I
mhm,
use
mhm.
DBT, dialectical behavior therapy.
Okay.
I use trauma therapy because I'm a trauma
Mhm,
specialist,
mhm.
maybe a couple of others in between, but those are the major ones. And
Okay.
CBT is thoughts, feelings, behavior. How do these things combine and create, whether it's a functional life or a dysfunctional life? What we're doing sometimes, it's teaching people how to think or how to process what's going on, or sometimes how not to, because sometimes we're overthinking or we're using too much of our cognitive processes. Our behavior, well, what are your habits? What are your routines, your schedules? What is it that you want to do or don't want to do anymore? And then your feelings. So all of the two, thinking and behaving, inform how you feel about things, your emotions. And sometimes our emotions are way out of whack. We're getting mood swings, we're too depressed, we're too anxious. And so we kind of have to figure out how to keep those in balance. That's CBT. DBT is dialectical behavior therapy. This more involves emotional regulation and relationships. DBT, it includes features of CBT as well as mindfulness. Which is, mindfulness is becoming a little bit more research evidence-based right now. But it didn't always start out like that. Mindfulness came from spiritual religion. And so sometimes people have a difficulty with understanding that it's not so much meditation as in the Buddhist culture, Buddhist religion, but it is practicing non-judgment and self-compassion. Basically, we could be sitting here, but it's like, okay, what are you cooking for lunch tonight? What are you cooking for dinner tonight? What am I doing? What's going on? Like, our mind could be everywhere. And it's like, well, no, you're having an interview. Forget about everything else.
Being present.
This moment, being present. And so mindfulness is not religion. It's derivative. You see a lot of the same, well, I shouldn't even say it's derivative. You see a lot of the connections between the two, but it's pretty, it's becoming more evidence-based. They're seeing that if you're practicing mindfulness, a lot of stress reduction, blood pressure, even in physical health, you see improvements. And so DBT encompasses all of those, and emotional regulation is DBT was mainly created for individuals with borderline personality. The founder is Marsha Linehan, and she's a borderline personality disorder specialist, I would say. And she found that CBT was not working for these individuals. It was too structured. And individuals with this disorder need a little bit more nuance to their treatment. And so she took some of CBT and said, okay, we're going to put in the emotional regulation, and we're going to tie in some of the interpersonal and intrapersonal features as well. And then trauma therapy is trauma therapy, where we kind of explore what a person has been through narrative, creating your own story of what you've been through. But that narrative therapy starts with stabilization, and stabilization is you don't want the individual to be too, you want them to be in a healthy emotional state before you jump right into trauma treatment, because sometimes trauma therapy can elicit certain feelings and reactions of the trauma. And so you want to be able to give that person tools so that when that is happening, they're able to deal with it instead of like declining and becoming worse, because then that's not going to help your treatment. You're going to have to start all over again. So those are the three main ones that I use.
Okay.
Long-winded, I know.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any last things that we would like to state before we close off? Anything that I may have missed that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I would like to hear from you just what your observations are about, just mental health in general, not for necessarily yourself, but just what you see, what you observe. What I don't know exactly your specific field of work, so I don't know if by nature you see it a lot or not, but just kind of like your observations.
Okay. When I want to say there's certain things that you've mentioned that my mind works on that as well. Growing up, he said humble beginnings. I've always been someone to see when someone when someone reacts and they do certain things, I don't automatically think that they're doing this just for doing its sake. What is the reason why that may have caused them to do that? So my perspective, the framework that I always go back to is the person in environment. So what in their environment that's causing them to do this? What are they seeing that may, influence them to do certain things? Finding the right coping skill for that individual, because not every person is the same. And the spiritual aspect as well. I'm learning more of how the spiritual part of it helps. And what I'm more into now is what we consume affects our emotional being, how our mental state of that. So yes,
Yes,
that's for me.
absolutely. Then that's a really good one. Like when you are interacting with people and they're doing things, sometimes it's hard to like be a human, but also be understanding and graceful, because it's like, well, you have feelings as well that are
Correct.
sometimes hurt. But I think what you're mentioning is basically like that perspective, right? That if we can create a proper appropriate perspective, then maybe we won't be as affected by people go, it ain't got nothing to do with us. Like, okay,
Exactly.
like that's you in your life. I wish you the best, but I'm out because that's my boundary now.
There's
Right?
two things too, being that understanding person, but sometimes being understanding doesn't mean that it doesn't affect how you feel, but it's just learning not to hold on to it for too long and letting it go, but being able to process and work through certain things. So understanding self, as you mentioned, the masterclass that you have upcoming, understanding self is very important in being able to process certain things. So the master plan, the master plan, it's when?
It's gonna be on the 8th of May, next week, Sunday, from 5:30 to 6:30.
Okay, and you said there's a cost that's connected to it?
Yes, it's gonna be $20 per person and $15 from moms. Because hey, moms, happy Mother's Day.
So is it something that you're gonna be doing monthly, you said?
Yes, and so on the Facebook page right now, the flyer is up with the first 4 dates, which is the next 4 months. And then from there, we're just gonna add dates to the list.
Okay. So if you would like to find more information concerning this, you can find Therapist Talks on Facebook. Do you also have an Instagram page?
Not as yet.
Okay. And I believe there's a WhatsApp chat?
Yes, there's a WhatsApp. It's 581-2327.
Okay. So I think that's about it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm talking. I love it.
Thank you so much, Zoya, for being here on the platform and sharing your expertise regarding mental health, as this is a very important topic. And kudos to you for stepping out and doing what's in your heart and being that outspoken person, because we need to talk more about it and in order for persons to be more open and receptive and to help minimize the stigma, because we know, growing up on the island, it's not really something we talk, but people are still kind of skeptical, yes, to reach out for that help. And everybody needs somebody. We can't go through it all alone, and finding someone that is mandated to keep what you're going through, because that's one thing that people do mention. Oh, I don't want this and this to be talking about what you're going through, but they're mandated to keep what you talk to them, to themselves, unless you're being a harm to yourself
or others.
Yes.
That's the only 2 reasons.
The only 2 reasons. So don't be afraid to seek help if you do need it. Thank you again, Zoya. Guys, please go to the Therapist Talk on Facebook to check it out. Go in.
Follow along the page.
Yes.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored. I'm always honored. And Black women love it. We're out here doing our thing. Like, listen, I'm honored to always share a space with anybody, but especially women, Black women.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you guys again for watching today's interview. Have a blessed and a wonderful day. Bye.